So, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the final sprint of the Surfliner Spring Work Cycle. Specifically, I'm referring to Comet Sprint 24 and Lark Sprint 11, which already tells us that the sprint had a Comet and Lark, which is our shared authority control platform and API. So the focus was on Comet and Lark. Before I ask Tamsin to shows the progress that was made in this sprint, please remember that you can post questions in the chat during the demo. Oh, you can wait till Tamsin is wrapping up to ask your questions in person. Very well, Tamsin.
Yeah, thanks everyone for being here. I'm going to go ahead and get a screen share going. You can hopefully see a list of objects. Great. Okay, yeah, so we had a lot of different threads of work going on this work cycle. And I'm going to highlight a couple of them particularly and then in the demo, and then just say a few things about a few others. We will have a end of work cycle review at some time in the near future. I don't think that's scheduled, where we'll try and do a pretty cohesive demo of the whole progress, especially on Comet for the work cycle. Before I start with demo, I'll remind us again that this work cycle was split between a period where the whole team or half the team worked on Comet and half the team worked on upgrades for dependencies, and then the second two sprints, half the team worked on Comet and half the team worked on Lark. That was sort of the theory. Really what we ended up doing is working mainly on Lark from a Comet integration standpoint. So I'll point to a few things that we did on Lark, but I won't really demo any controlled vocabulary work today. Okay, so here's first of all, before the work cycle, we did some requirements gathering work around the visibility model. So the behavior is sort of, if I have an object to demo permissions, if I have an object, I can select at ingest time some number of sort of canned permission sets, and we did do. I think we completed the work that we had scoped on the new permission structure. So we have a number of different levels that you can choose. You can have the object be private. You can have the object have access restricted to Comet users. You can have the object have access restricted to campus users. I'll say more about metadata only. We've demoed that already, but I think we fixed a few things about how it works, this work cycle, and then you can have the object be public. So I'm going to set this one to campus. These permissions are intended to be global, so you manage them in Comet, but they also impact other systems that this object will appear in. So if you want this object to be visible to campus users in the variety of front ends that it might appear in, then this would be an appropriate way to make sure that happens. If I would like to have, if I would like to change this to be access only to Comet users, then I can do that, and you'll see that its permissions change. I'm going to add some files to this object. Do like image. Why not? All of these. I've noticed this about the form since Hyrax, since the Hyrax upgrade, is that if you add a file, then sometimes you have to go back and touch this title field. Gabriella, I'm saying that for your benefit. I think that there's some kind of funny JavaScript behavior happening there. Okay, we only got 2 of those files. That's fun. In any case, so by default, the files ingested are going to inherit the permissions that the object they're attached to have. The metadata only behavior is kind of special in that what this visibility does is set permissions on the object, which is to say the metadata, to be public, but sets the files to private. We probably want to do something about that. Oh, fun. Longshoe, I thought we fixed this so that it would work. I'm going to go ahead and do private across the board. We closed a ticket related to this, y'all. So I'm going to see if public works.
Maybe we're reopening a ticket.
I think we're reopening a ticket, at least with a limited scope. I'm going to go ahead and see if it works from public, because that would explain why we thought it worked. Oh no, it sets it to Comet. Maybe is that the behavior that we specified, Gabriella?
Yes,
set to Comet?
Yes,
oh,
not private.
Okay. We almost never want to set things to private. That's what we decided. Okay. So this is working, y'all. Sorry for my confusion. So what we expect here is, for now, the object, the metadata portion of the structure of this to be public, and therefore if we publish this object to a front end, you should be able to discover it. But for the individual files to be only visible to Comet users, which is to say to logged in users in the Comet environment. So that's the metadata only behavior. I think the only work that we have remaining to do with the actual visibility structure is to remove this surfliner option. This one's sort of meaningless and was default Hyrax behavior. But otherwise, this structure is what we were looking for out of visibility. Okay. The other big piece that I want to show off today is that we have been doing some work on making large scale import viable. So what we did was we made it so that the import runs completely in the background. So I've added a file that has a CSV file that has 200 records. These records all have like very similar titles. These records all have very similar titles, like lovely title 1, lovely title 2, etc. And if I ingest them, I think that we should see a bunch of them in queue. Yes. So a whole bunch of objects went into the import queue. This is the sort of like behind the scenes dashboard for viewing viewing what's happening in the background. So we got like 200 objects into this queue, and we can see that we've got some busy threads working on them. You'll see a lot of other jobs in queued because part of what happens when we ingest objects is that lots of background work happens in this environment. And when if I take a peek, yes. So we're seeing a list of objects that are in queued and a list of objects that are processed. And some of these are getting ingested. And importantly, the achievement here is that if I enqueue many, if I put many importers, say like I've got 10 different people working on imports that are going to be 10,000 objects each, then they can deposit their file and have the validation happen, and then push the import button and see their objects go. So all entries processed 200, total work entries 200. I'm not sure where the other 13 come from. I see similar behavior on the one that I ran earlier. So I think we have a little bit of fussing on the bulk engines counting to do here. But we did see all these objects come through. And you can sort of like click on any of them and see what we got. I did the no source identifier file so that I could run the same file many times and have it ingest different objects. So yeah, so that's the background behavior. The way that the work happens here is that the background workers are running on separate systems from the actual web application, which means that it's very easy if those systems are bogged down, if the queue gets big, to stand up more workers and take objects off the queue faster. We haven't yet done a real load testing test on this to figure out how many objects we can push through concurrently. At some point, I would expect that the problem with ingesting objects fast would be the database, but because our database is PostgreSQL, I would think that we have quite a few concurrent workers moving along and not blocking on each other before we hit that point where the database is actually a problem. So in theory, what we're talking about here is if we have many different people doing large scale ingests independently from each other, they should never see trouble with with being stuck on each other's work. Okay, so those are the main things that I wanted to demo today. We also wrapped up work on the Hyrax 4 Ruby 3 ingest work, which we also worked on, ingest. My brain's stuck on ingest. The upgrade of this Comet infrastructure to the newest version of Hyrax and the newest version of Ruby. So we did that work. You'll see some places in the UI where there has been some UI impact. Oh, so I think only maybe on edit of importers do you see this. So like these tabs we expect to look Margaret, I see your messages, but if you're hoping that I'm reading them, I want to tell you that I'm not.
No, no.
Okay,
You're good.
thank you. We do want these tabs here to be styled like these tabs here, for instance. And there are various places where the process of doing this upgrade led to some style degradation in the UI, and we've been fixing those step by step. I think maybe the last time I demoed, we had funny breadcrumb behavior, and that's been fixed. And there's still a few places where we have style fix up to do. I think some of that will probably continue today, but some of it's also just Gabriella and I need to identify things. I thought that we had fixed these, but it seems like the in review status in particular didn't get that style. Oh, maybe it's just the status is all the statuses as opposed to the visibilities. Yeah, okay. Curious. So like some of these labels degraded and needed to be, or degraded and needed to be fixed. So we've been doing a little bit more of that UI work as part of the Hyrax for Ruby 3 upgrade. The other major line of work that's been ongoing that we're not demoing today, but that I do rather expect we'll have something to show you at the end of work cycle update, because the branch that this work is on is quite close to being done, is end-to-end shoreline ingest. So there's a sort of demo workflow that allows you to import objects into a project that's specified for ingest to the geodata platform. The geodata metadata is largely supported by the ingest platform. I think there's maybe a few rough edges to iron out there. And then when you deposit those objects and push them through the workflow, at a certain point, they get pushed out to the queue in the way that we've demoed for collection published to the OAI endpoint. So just to refresh your memory, oh, not on a project though. Just to refresh your memory, if you publish this collection, then the individual, there are no individual objects within it. Let's find one with some objects. So if you publish this collection, like so, then the individual objects within it go to become discoverable in the OAI endpoint. And similar behavior happens on a workflow trigger for the shoreline discovery. The main thing I think that's keeping us from merging that branch and demoing it here is that we don't have a super great test environment for ensuring that that once it's in, that we keep it working correctly. So some of that integration work in the test and review environments is ongoing, and once we feel like we're confident that that we have the kind of QA harnesses that we need for it, we'll we'll get it merged through. There is more work on this front to do, particularly we're not yet pushing files, shape files and geotiffs or what have you into the geospatial platform. So far, we're just ingesting I think only the relatively basic metadata. And then there'll need to be some iteration to get more of the geospatial metadata profile ingested properly and get the files pushed through as well. But a lot of work happened on this front during this work cycle, and we're super excited about it. And then last but not least, I do want to draw attention to the LARC work that happened. So I have two things to call out here. We have been working on completing the LARC metadata model, which is work that we sort of left dangling at the end of the last time we worked on LARC, which is some time ago. And particularly, we've been working on adding structured support for labels, which is one of the more complex pieces of the proposed LARC metadata model, which is to say we use SCOS XL for labels. So instead of having just a literal string as the value for the label, a literal or a language tag string as the value for the label, we have a structured node that can have different metadata attached to it, so that you can do things like say this label is for this campus versus that campus, or make notations about the usage of those labels. And I think there's a couple of other fields that are attached there. That work is work in progress right now. We did get language tag support in for the labels, but some of the other metadata fields attached to the SCOS XL labels need to be ironed out. And then on the Comet side, we've been working on adding controlled values specifically to these forms. So if you have a value list specified in the metadata configuration, like for write statements, then we would expect to see a drop down here that would allow you to select from those value lists. We thought we were going to merge the fix for that yesterday, but it ended up not going over well. So we've rolled that back and are trying to wrap up that work today to make the controlled value list support work correctly. And then there's some follow-up work that we want to do about LARC integration for like type ahead behavior for lists that are larger, or sorry, for controlled vocabularies that are larger and less list-like. Yeah, I think that's everything, and I think that I would love to leave a little bit of time for questions. So I'm going to wrap it up there. This is the last sprint of this work cycle, which means that we're all probably going to take a breath at this point. And Gabriella and I are going to start to talk about what take stock of what we were able to do, and what is left for us, and what's going to be next for the next Comet spike. In the off cycle, I do expect that we'll be ingesting content on the UCSB side, especially. So I think we're going to have extra additional Comet work happening related to that during the off cycle, and I think that's also a little bit dependent on some conversations that here locally that have to happen this week and next. But I do anticipate that you'll see the UCSB side pretty active on getting data into our local implementation and submitting patches where we need to support that work. Woohoo! Were there questions that Gabriella, you can MC for me at this point, or did anybody want to chime in with verbal questions?
I just want to say that I personally want to thank the entire Surfliner team for what I feel was a really productive work cycle. In fact, I think it's one of our best, and I'm happy to state that the team's cohesiveness has rendered them into what I would call a true high-performance team. Likewise, thank you, Tamsin, for your leadership, for always making yourself available to all of us. Chrissy, since I see that you're here, we have not confirmed our next work cycle for the summer. I think we had tentative dates of July 26th to September 19th. But have you been able to confirm that next work cycle?
It's on the agenda for the PO Tech Lead meeting tomorrow, because there's a Sinvira community sprints that we're planning to participate in related to Valkyrizing Hyrax. And so we need to figure out what's best for the team in terms of scheduling around that. So stay tuned.
Thank you. And then as Tamsin mentioned, look for an invite to the end of the work cycle update for stakeholders coming your way probably within the next week or two. I'll get that scheduled.
I'm excited to have the opportunity to sort of throw my memory back to where we were 8 or 9 weeks ago and show us everything that happened during this whole work cycle. Often it's as we do incremental progress, which is a very positive pattern. It's easy to lose the big picture, so it'll be fun to sort of go back and talk about demo from a sort of fresh standpoint.
Yeah,
Thanks everyone for being here.
Last but not least, we are still going to get together and plan our workflow work some of you stakeholders. So stay tuned for that.
Thank you all.
Thank you.